start our timer?
Go ahead.
Okay. So the title of my presentation is Authority's Influence on Understanding and Interpretation of Truth. So for my real life situation, I'm going to be talking about Wi-Fi in schools. So in our school and in every other school in the district, there are certain blocks put on Wi-Fi so you can't reach certain websites. And those blocks are on a variety of different things. There's ones on social media, there's ones on different educational sources, really just any sort of thing. So specifically for me, what happened was I was a sophomore and we were doing our language arts final and we had to do a presentation about some sort of injustice that we saw in the world. So I'm really passionate about animal rights, so I thought that I would do something in that area. So obviously for animal rights, you started thinking of like PETA because they're a really well-known animal rights organization. So I went to PETA and it was blocked because it's down here. It's kind of hard to see, but it says because it was categorized as mature content. So this mature content, there's no way to understand why it's mature. There's no way to understand why it was blocked or why this information was being restricted. So from this situation and my inability to do this project how I wanted to do it because I didn't have complete information, I saw a lot of different knowledge issues, like incomplete information, so I wasn't able to see a certain side of a story regarding animal rights. Personal bias, because I felt that I should be able to see that. I saw generalization because it was as mature and not really described as anything else. The culture of following authority in school, because our school district said it was blocked for mature content, so I kind of just trusted it because that's what I'm told to do. So that led to me to my knowledge question is, to what extent is the understanding of truth dependent on trust in authority? So within this, I came up with a few different subsets of questions. So who decides what websites are blocked was one question I was thinking when I ran into this issue. What qualifies a website to be blocked by the school district? And then why are laptops provided with a firewall that works at school but anywhere else that you would take said laptop? So in order to get this information, what I did was I emailed several different administrators who were in charge of technology in our district, and I got some answers. So administrators who work for every school district, in our case LPS, they decide what websites are blocked and why they're blocked, what qualifies a website to be blocked by a school district. So there are national guidelines and this one act that I'm going to talk about later called SIPA that say what a school should allow, what they shouldn't allow to be passed and just presented in a school through the internet. But essentially every school and every school district does make the final call, but there's general guidelines that everyone's originally supposed to follow. And then why are laptops provided with restrictions on what information can be accessed is because since the laptops are provided, they are technically school taxpayer funded things. So the same rules that apply at school should apply whenever you're using those school devices. So from these questions, I was able to extract some knowledge claims. So authority figures decide what information is presented to the public. Understanding of truth is dependent on available information, and restricting access to information causes the concept of truth to be skewed. So from my emailing, I got an email back from the director of tech services for our school district, and this is just a quote that he said about those questions that I had. So the way our filter works with school-provided Chromebooks is that the Chromebook is bound to the filter, no matter where it travels. We feel like the taxpayer-funded resources, parentheses the Chromebook, should be used for instructional purposes such as research, applications, writing, etc., whether it's at school, the library, or at home. Therefore, the same access that the Chromebook has at school is what it has outside of school. So this is just a counterclaim to what I thought of as a student. I thought, well, I'm being restricted of my knowledge. I don't get to understand something because of the school Wi-Fi, where, as this counterclaim shows, why an administrator would think that would be okay. So we don't think of this, or personally I thought of this as just trusting authority and doing kind of what I'm supposed to do from administration. But really it's more of, instead of a local authority that you're following, it's more of a national authority, because in 2000, SIPA, or the Children's Internet Protection Act, describes what's acceptable for schools to allow children to see on the internet, and any public school has to follow SIPA. And another thing about SIPA is that they're required to monitor the students' use of internet to be able to predict future misuses of it and know what they're supposed to block and be allowed to use, and just report back about SIPA. So while administration eventually does make the final call about what is and what isn't blocked and how far they want to go with following SIPA, there's still a big sort of trust in the government and through an act passed by Congress that a lot of people don't even know about. So this relates to the area of knowing human behavior, because school Wi-Fi is blocked because you're basing what you want to block on past human behavior to predict future human behavior. For example, when we were freshmen, Snapchat wasn't blocked on school Wi-Fi. But then once teachers and administrators started noticing that kids were on their phones and just using social media instead of learning on school Wi-Fi, they decided to block that URL to eliminate that sort of distraction. So that would be an example of a misuse of internet resources being blocked to kind of prevent further uses of something like that. And it also encourages non-task learning. So another area of knowledge is ethics and socioeconomic inequalities. So eventually with my presentation, I was able to go home and use my own computer and cite PETA and understand what was going on in that respect, because I had my own computer and I had access to internet at home. But a lot of people, their parents can't afford to buy them a laptop, or they can't afford to have Wi-Fi at home, so they're never going to see the knowledge that's restricted by the authority, in this case the school district. So that doesn't allow them to have a holistic view of this issue and sort of understand the world around them in a more clear and concise way. So what this plays into is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs essentially is telling you what you need to be able to live a full and happy life, and without the things below it, you can't have a different level. So without safety needs and physiological needs, you can't have love and belonging, and so on and so forth up the pyramid. So where this sort of situation falls is under the esteem category. So the freedom to just access any information you would want to and sort of understand any sort of topics that interest you would fall under freedom, esteem, status, recognition, that sort of thing. So without being able to have the freedom to understand or form your own opinions based on any source you want to look at, you're never going to come to self-actualization or the desire to become the most that one can be, and that's going to make society stay stagnant and just has a really big effect on the future. So then, my second real-life situation here is that this whole restriction and censorship idea isn't really a new concept. It's been happening with a lot of different authority figures, especially in governments where there are like really strong censorship ideas. For example, right now, North Korea comes to mind for a lot of people when they think about propaganda. So in countries under the control of like a dictator or an authoritarian regime or anything, access to information is really restricted, especially if it could go against the government or go against the teachings of the government, especially if there's just one totalitarian head. So propaganda is used to skew a population's understanding of the truth because it's the only information that they get, especially in North Korea, because there's no outside media, no media really at all, unless it's coming through the government. So their understanding of the truth is really skewed. And I didn't put a translation on here, but these two posters are talking about nuclear weaponry and its propaganda regarding that. So this one, it's talking about how with just the push of a button, Kim Jong-un, because he's such a powerful man and he wants all of his people to think of him as the most powerful person in the world, he could destroy all of the continental United States, and he could destroy Washington even easier when in actuality, and just to sort of make their country seem as though it's the biggest, I guess, nuclear powerhouse in this situation, when in actuality there are so many different places and countries that have more power than them in that regard. So in conclusion, I can draw that restrictions on knowledge are put in place in order to protect students, but really what ends up happening is that people see a one-sided argument of a story, and their knowledge is really limited because they don't have complete information. So incomplete information influences this. The bias of the authority around you influences this. And then these findings, it can be concluded that authority has a really heavy impact on a group's understanding about their situation and their own truth about it, especially when that authority is so prominent in daily life. So incomplete information prohibits a learner from being able to have a well-rounded opinion and really understand the truth as a whole. And that's my bibliography.